Hello, everyone. I want to welcome all of you back to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snider. My guests this evening are Nancy Leader and Starr DiGiacomo. And let me first ask Nancy to tell our listeners a little bit about your website, Nancy.
Yes, thanks for having me on, Mark. My website is zetatalk.com, Zetatalk. And it's basically information that is relayed from the zetas, from Zeta Reticuli. These are the tall, gray, big eyes. They have different species. Some of them are short and beige, and some of them are tall and white with like a pumpkin head. So, like with mankind, we have races of man, they have races of Zeta. And their name for themselves is not Zeta, but they come from the Zeta Reticuli constellation, where there are many planets habitable around dim stars there. So, Benny and Barney Hill called them Zetas, and that stuck. I have been a contactee since I was a child, about 7, 8 years old, and had myself enhanced in my late 20s by the Zetas who put a little bit of their DNA inside my head where the telepathy center is so that I could pick up their concepts, the concepts that they were sending me with greater clarity. And that's the basis of Zeta Talk. It's information I receive from them. I wrap English around it. I type it up. I put it on the website. The website has been going on since 1995, and it was really born at that time because I joined Michael Lindemann's of the 2020 group. He had a support group called ISCNI in American Online, and people were asking questions. They said, "Well, you guys are getting your information from your contacts. How about taking our questions and getting them answered?" And I'm getting mine answered all the time. What do you want to know? And Zeta Talk began, and boy, it was like wildfire. It's gone all over the world. It's highly popular, being translated into different languages. And I think there's at least 10,000 pages on the Zeta Talk website that contain Zeta Talk information that was relayed by them on I don't know how many different subjects, probably as many subjects. They have a remarkably accurate prediction track record. And I could talk for hours about that, but just leave it at that, which many people consider proof that it's not me, and it isn't me, I'm telling you. They have come across with things that mankind, the scientists, have said, well, we now know what the Zetas said several years ago. And there's no way a woman in central Wisconsin with only a high school degree could know that stuff, could be that smart on that many subjects.
When did
And
you first have contact with the Zetas?
I was probably 7 or 8 years old, a kid down in the woods. I was always a tomboy running around bare feet catching frogs. And I'd see the raccoons or the squirrels or whatever, and they just kind of popped out from behind trees, and I made nothing of it. If I saw a deer or a squirrel, I said, well, there's another critter, and I didn't have any bad vibes from them. So it was about that time. They took a little sample of skin from behind one of my elbows. When I had recall, since the days of Roswell, all contact has been recorded only in our subconscious, not the conscious. That doesn't mean that we're not aware of it, because the conscious is the dominant memory bank and intelligence. It doesn't forget anything. It doesn't lie. It's just steady stream. And this is so that contactees don't get pummeled to death. There are many people that are frightened by the idea of the alien presence. Pat Robinson, of the 2020 group, has said anyone who talks to aliens should be stoned. Well,
Right,
he's
right.
advocating, murder.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
this does happen, so that people don't get divorced or fired or murdered or whatever. We're all aware subconsciously, or all of people who are contactees, but it doesn't break out into our consciousness unless we pull it forward from our subconscious, which can be done by self-meditation, self-hypnosis, during dreams, etc. I wasn't consciously aware I was a contactee until I was 55 years old. I was a sleeper. And then I sat down and remembered all this stuff by self-hypnosis. One of the things, the type of things that comes out in self-hypnosis is that you can smell things, you feel, touch. It's not like a daydream. Daydreams are kind of flat, really. But it's full sound and fury, the recall is. And I remember getting a nip of skin taken from behind my elbow. I thought, what? And I backed up to the mirror, and sure enough, I have a little scar there, like a divot. And I never, who would notice that? You don't back up to mirrors and peer at the back of your elbows. But that's a confirmation that my recall was real.
Starr, what's your role in all this? Tell us your story.
Well, I was on before, so you kind of sort of know. I mean, I did not know where I was going, what I was doing till about 2002. So it was a long journey for me. And like Nancy said, I mean, she took things from her subconscious and brought it forward. It took a lot of that because I had a lot of experiences, throughout my life. But once I found Zeta Talk, which was a long journey in itself, I found Zeta Talk in, I think, 2009. I believe so. And everything made sense. Absolutely everything made sense. So I started documenting, pulling things from pole shifting and putting things on there like train derailments and, plane crashes and things that made sense to me because I'm a very visual person. So that's how it all started, and Nancy is my all-time hero. She just is. I'm so happy to be on with you, truly. Zeta Talk is just a vast amount of information, and if you can read it for yourself, which Mark, now I know you are, this is a good thing. You just have to read it, to understand what's going on in the world, and everything makes sense.
Starr, do you think you had contact with the Zetas?
I've had contact with a whole bunch of different beings that I thought I was crazy until Nancy wrote down, all the different beings that she had come in contact with because she went to a conference with Council of Worlds, which she'll explain that. But I had a contact with all these strange beings. And yes, I have had contact with Zetas. Yes, they're loving, loving beings. But I didn't know that there were so many different aliens. I just had your typical vision of, Betty and Barney Hill, that type of thing. So, but I wasn't one to read all the sci-fi news, and that wasn't my thing. This wasn't my thing at all. It's just that once I found Zeta Talk, my whole life changed. And now I've dedicated my whole life to, getting the answers out.
Nancy, did you go to this Council of the Worlds?
Actually, I was introduced to different alien types, but I don't believe I've ever been to the Council of Worlds. I do have a image of different alien types on that page, but those were just types that I had met, and I was trying to indicate, you never know what you're going to find there. I got what's called a life form orientation, and there were several of them. One was with hominoids, maybe a dozen different types, and the tall, skinny broomstick, guy, an Anunnaki, squat little people that were covered with looks like turtle shell platelets, different ones. And then we moved on to the weird, where I met Beanbag Man. I met a bug, big bug floating in algae-covered pond, and boy, that was hard for me to do recall on. I kept resisting, and finally I pulled it through, and he stood up, and it was like a giant cockroach with all those legs, etc. So reptilians, fish creatures. And after a while, you get over it. You know, you just relax and say, oh, well. One was an amoeba. It was like a big rug, you know, that was kind of pea green on the floor, and it flowed and wrapped around my ankle. And when it did, I could pick up the telepathic thoughts. So people who are going to be in a situation like myself where I can talk about different alien types um, are introduced to these critters, you know, and they're all really nice, you know. If they're immature, they don't get invited on a spaceship to come and make introductions in other worlds. And I'm sure that many humans have been taken on spaceship to visit their worlds. You know, this is a part of our awakening process.
Starr, we're getting a little noise from your connection, so why don't you mute if you're not speaking?
Okay.
Nancy, you talked about these dim stars that the Zetas live near.
Yeah.
Are these red dwarfs?
Um, no, I'm not sure. I don't know. They just said dim star. They basically said that we humans, when we look to Zeta Reticuli, we see various stars or suns, but those are not their suns. Their suns are too dim to be seen from Earth.
Hmm.
So I think they're just dim suns.
That's very interesting. There must be so many stars out there we just don't even know about.
Oh, it's more vast. They said this is the reason our eyes are so big and dark, because like our night creatures, they need to have huge eyes and able to pull in enough light to be able to see. So that's why the big dark eyes.
So on their world, it's not like our planet during the day, right? It's almost like dusk all the time or
It
something
would
like that.
appear that way. And they said that our sun is really not a very bright sun either, that there are some suns that are so bright that intelligent creatures on those worlds, you know, are nearby, cannot be out in the heat of the day, and that it is virtually considered a crime or murder if somebody else in the community is caught outside when the sun is about to be overhead, and not to let them in so that they can be shielded from that sun. That the sun is so intense and so bright on those worlds.
And what are the societies like that exist on Zeta Reticuli? Are they thousands of years ahead of us?
Well, it depends, and I think that they are an older race, yes, and been around since even before mankind was genetically engineered. So they're ahead of us, yes, and you know there's an evolution, not just with from like amoebas to intelligent creatures, but after intelligent, a creature that gets intelligent enough to be conscious of itself as something different, you know, as unique, I am me and Starr is Starr, etc., then souls can spark in that creature. And then this is considered like the kindergarten of worlds, or what they call third density, or and why density and not dimensions? It's because it's a vibrational speed of the physical atoms. And then when we sort out what we are in kindergarten, either we want to be community oriented and care about other people's as much as we care about ourselves, or do we want to be really selfish and remain childish and be hoard, greedy, control freaks, and maybe even given to sadism out of, you know, a power play? Um, when that's sorted out, and usually 5% of young souls go to prison planets because they just refuse to grow up, and the other 95% get to graduate after approximately 1,000 or 1,200 or so lifetimes, and move to a higher frequency or fourth density, which means that the physical atoms are moving faster. So the soul bridges all these physical vibrational frequencies, the stuff of souls. And if you ask the Zetas what the heck is the stuff of souls, the composition, they can't answer. they don't know what God is any more than we do, etc. But they are in fourth density, the Zetas. And most of the visitors visiting us are in fourth density, although we have some souls that come from fifth, sixth, seventh, etc., and they're living in life form, no longer need to be incarnated, who have returned to Earth at this time because it's a very transformative time.
You said mankind was genetically engineered. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, yeah. They have a fun article in Zeta Talk, one of my favorites, Races of Man, in which they talk about all the genetic engineering projects. And yes, we did come from apes, different apes. They recently talked about Chinaman was the orangutan, and there was Angola man who didn't survive, and he was actually kind of pink and fuzzy. They had Indonesia man also who did not survive, and he was barrel chested but too slow moving, and he got eaten by predators. So we had black man, white man. White man was from an ape that would get hopping mad and jump up and down, have a temper tantrum, and black man is from a more benign ape. I'm thinking it's the gorilla. And there's been some transplants, like the American Indian was actually about the size of a monkey, and were transplanted souls, but they have been, developed into a race of man. So the idea was that all races of man would eventually blend, and that has been happening around the world. So that Chinaman, for instance, was developed to offset the influence of the Anunnaki, who had enough half-breeds running around the globe, and their fierce temper and aggressive ways needed to be toned down.
Is Earth a prison planet?
Oh, heavens, no. We're a kindergarten, and a prison planet is so rule-oriented and so cruel to anyone who breaks the rules of whoever the prison master is that you couldn't mistake it. There are probably places on Earth that approach that. For instance, remember that house in Cleveland where the guy kidnapped 3 different women and had them locked up and would beat them and rape them and abort them. And I'm sure that was what a prison planet would be like. He was in charge, they weren't.
You talk about a vision on Zeta Talk that describes many of these changes that are going to take place on the Earth. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that was a very interesting holographic vision given to me. I was one of many contactees in the room, and I went up on the stage to introduce the producer, who was a creature, boy, on all the lineups I was in, I had never met one like that. Her legs were similar to a dog's. They had paws on the bottom and the knee bent backwards. Around her waist, she had a fringe of tentacles that could float out in the water and absorb nutrients. Her face was 2 huge grapefruit-sized yellow eyes, like a fly's eyes, a bug eyes. And her hands were they had kind of stubby fingers, but it was graspable, like she had an opposable thumb. So I held her hand and took her out there and introduced her because she was so bizarre. And boy, could she project an image. And she gave us all this telepathic, holographic image of what would happen to the plates of the globe during the 7 of 10. Now, what are we talking about, 7 of 10? In 2008, someone said, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is the pole shift, where are we? And the Zeta said, and now we're at a 2, and it gradually. So the 7 of 10 is where we have a lot of plate movement, and this is in process. The Indo-Australia plate is diving under the Himalayas, And you can see India is sinking because we keep getting these reports of islands going under. Bangladesh is sinking, blah, blah, blah. And Australia likewise is lifting. When it lifts, they had all those floods. I believe it was 2011. It was really the rivers backwashing and trapping the water inland and the like. But it was, it's the rains, and at the same time Indonesia was sinking, and South America rolls. The top part of it lobs over to the left like an ice cream cone falling. And then Africa rolls to where it's kind of dropping and into the Indian Ocean, but this has just started. And then we have the New Madrid splitting, etc. And the plates are going to move in a prescripted manner, according to the Zetas, that based on what is subducting, what is pushing over, and also what parts of the globe get tugged and pushed. All of this has created the huge uptick in earthquakes and vibrations that people are feeling, etc. And I don't want to talk forever. I'll just shut up and talk, because we're talking about the 7 of 10. 8 of 10, we're already merging into that, more visibility of the rogue planet coming through. And 9 of 10 is a 2-month period where it's called the last weeks. And the 10 of 10 is the hour of the pole shift. So this holographic vision was to show the 7 of 10 plate movements.
Starr, you post a lot of things on Facebook that document some of the strange events that are going on around the world. Can you tell us about that?
Well, if you want to go to prophecy and biblical stuff, we have red seas, red lakes, red rivers. So that's, a new phenomenon. A lot of it is algae. And I think that we found one a couple of years ago in China that was from a red dye factory. But, these things are happening, and it happened before, and it's been written about, and it's happening again. A lot of animals dying, a lot of animals and fish dying, washing up by the thousands. And people make all kinds of excuses, but really that's, a lot of it has to do with methane poisoning. A lot of animals are on the move. They don't stay in their own home ground. So towards the last hours or the last weeks, Zeta Talk says pay attention to your animals, pay attention to nature around you, because they're going to give you every signal you need. I truly believe that. But all these terrible things are happening. Diseases, I'm really big on diseases. And Zeta Talk just did a question and answer on Ebola, because it's frightening, very, very frightening. Smallpox, Ebola, bubonic plague. The list is endless. And it's because the ground is opening up. All of these things are coming either from the sky or from underneath us. So, these are things that I'm passionate about. That's what I like to post the most.
What is causing the methane poisoning?
Well, the methane is seeping from the ground. Nancy can answer this much better than you. Methane is seeping from the ground, but we have the ice caps that are melting that are bringing methane in. Nancy, can you explain this better?
I sure can. Basically, it's because the stress of the plates moving and being pulled and pushed and the like, and this is happening because this rogue planet, Nibiru, which is coming past the sun and toward us, it shoves our magnetic North Pole every day, and then it kind of turns around and at some point bounces back. So we have like what we call a polar push you away, now you bounce back. And all of this is jerking the plates of the Earth around. Well, when that happens, you have rock in layers that pull apart and release rotting vegetation that has been trapped in the past and has been moldering away down there, and the methane rises. So this is very devastating to birds and fish. They're very sensitive. You've heard of the canary in the coal mine. And where miners take a canary down in a cage because they're very sensitive to methane, they croak, they die. And if that happens, the miners say, let's get to the surface quick because we're going to have a methane explosion. And fish, likewise, are very sensitive. It causes an embolism in their body, and then, of course, that kills them. So all these dead fish, and everybody says, oh, well, lack of oxygen, or oh, well, and, you know, some pollutant in the water, and excuses are endless. Because right now, the whole thing about the passage of Nibiru is a big cover-up. So we have methane, yes, in the permafrost melting. There's a lot of rot under there. You know, we have the mammoths that have been discovered flash frozen, green grass in their tummies and buttercups between their teeth or whatever the heck. So obviously, it was a warm climate, and suddenly the crust moved during a pole shift, which is a crustal shift is included in that. Then they were frozen and remained frozen ever since. So vegetation was frozen too and then covered by the permafrost. If the permafrost melts or it cracks due to this shoving back and forth, here comes the methane. And that was what caused Tunguska to happen. It was not a meteor. It was methane that rises, and it's lighter than air, so it went up into the atmosphere, was sparked by lightning, and burned back down to its source, which was Tunguska, and boom. So they make a big deal out of how it was a meteor. Never found a meteor. The Russians know that. They went in and they couldn't find any meteor fragments at all. And there was a small earthquake that broke the permafrost in that area just ahead of time. So, you know, we get a lot of disinformation on these issues.
The Zetas have talked about this European tsunami and how it will affect Ireland and UK. And they say the tsunami will go approximately 50 miles inland, and people will need to be approximately 100 feet above sea level. Can you tell us about that, Nancy?
Sure. Actually, this is a fluid situation. The 7 of 10, as it was laid out, was going to create a violent New Madrid adjustment that was going to pull the North Atlantic apart so that water, you know, flowed in and then rebounded, and it would rebound toward Europe, because that's the way the Atlantic currents go anyway. They come up, you know, the East Coast and over toward Europe, and that would be a horrific tsunami. But sometime 2 years ago, there was a deal between Obama and the Council of Worlds. Not that I was involved, but this is the way I understand it. Obama said, look, I want to tell people that the passage is going to happen, and I will work to do this, you know, with other leaders. And he has partnered with Russia and China on this matter, because we need to inform our people so that they understand they need to migrate to safer areas and anticipate tidal flooding and all that. And the Council of Worlds agreed to slow down the 7 of 10 plate movements until people had a chance to understand what was happening. And why are they doing this? Because our world is a schoolhouse, and people need to be able to take their spiritual opportunities to reach out and help each other, or to say, no, I'm going to be immature and selfish and hoard and just take care of me. You know, and because this is our schoolhouse, and they want people to have that chance, not just die. So they agreed, and they worked with Obama, and this is still in process, and this is going to happen. So the European tsunami is much mitigated. It'll still happen, but it won't be anything like the original. However, as we get in toward the last weeks, we're going to have sloshing back and forth, 200 to 300 foot tidal waves. This is not big waves crashing, but just the tide keeps rising and rising and rising. And when we have the pole shift, it'll be 500 and 600 feet. So you got to get away from the coast. You got to plan on that, and you will have time, you know, to make the move. But you better start planning.
So Obama has contact with the Council of Worlds.
That's my understanding. He's a star child. He was Lincoln.
What will New York City look like when these big waves start coming in?
Well, I recently watched The Day After Tomorrow, and in which they had a big influx into New York City, and that's not far from reality. But you have to add the fact that we're going to have big earthquakes, and Richter 9 or magnitude 9 worldwide. So all the cities will, be affected by the skyscrapers or whatever are going to come crashing down, depending on how they're built and how they're grounded and the like. And imploding buildings is a factor too. What does this mean? It means that whenever you have the high rises, they go underneath X number of floors. And all that down there is substations, electrical, plumbing, etc. And people don't see that. They think the city is ground level up. Well, what happens if you have a lot of earthquakes, etc., and the foundations under the buildings falls or is not steady, and there's crumbling? Well, it's called an implosion. The plumbing actually pulls the building into the center and down. Why would it not? It's all connected. All these toilets, all these, the sewage and everything, boom, and it would be pulling the floors down. So it's not just, that the stairwells are shaky. It's much worse than that. So don't be in the cities when this stuff starts, because they're death traps.
So is New York City going to basically implode?
Implode and flood, yes, and be totally unlivable. You know, well, they have a lot of horror movies, about disasters, apocalyptic disasters, and afterwards. If it's not zombies, it's Mad Max scenarios, and so no need to talk too much about that. But uh, what are you going to eat? You're going to eat each other. Cannibalism will become a reality. Because even if you've got rats to eat, they got to eat something too. So you've got to get out of the cities, and you have to get. Starr is a good example. She's walking the talk. She's got goats. She's got a wood burning, stove slash furnace. She has garden. I have a garden, an herbal garden. Lots of herbal meds. I live on a river, that is full of fish. In an area that's going to have a good climate in the aftertime. The whole United States won't do badly. The climate will greatly change. Alaska will be tropical, for instance. But you have to plan, learn how to garden, learn how to save seed. Goats and chickens are just great. Starr has goats. I had chickens, for a while. They run around and eat bugs, and they give you eggs, and then you can have chicken soup, at a certain point. So um, you can't plan on starting this at the last minute. There's a learning curve. You need to. I mean, chickens have a main hen that is the brooder, and she broods all the eggs from all the other hens. Who knew this kind of stuff? I didn't know this.
Hmm.
So, and you got to watch those roosters, raise them, hand raise them when they're little, because they attack, and boy, getting pecked on the kneecap by a rooster is no fun. Or it's the fist, the claw. They come with their claws up, whammo. So, you might have to walk around with a shield. I use a garbage can top as a shield. So you have to learn these things, and start early. Don't hold back.
Star, did you move out of a city?
I did. Um, I lived in New York, then I lived in California, then I lived in Pennsylvania for 14 years, moved to Florida, hated Florida. Oh my God, because they started building everything up, a
Hmm.
million neighbors and lots of noise and confusion. Then I moved to South Carolina, realized I wasn't high enough. That was not making me happy. Plus, it was really hot, sometimes hotter there than in Florida. So yes, it took a long time for me to do this, and people think I'm crazy. But you have to start somewhere, and I love animals, so that was a big help. But Nancy, I have a funny story about the chickens. I didn't know anything about chickens, and now I have five. I had six, because I took my daughter to Tractor Supply to buy food around Easter. So of course we came home with 6 chickens, and I had them in my guest room in a Tupperware, a big Tupperware. And I bought the, the light and the food and whatever. No one told me that they were such filthy creatures. And once they could jump on top of the Tupperware, they would fall out. So, and they, of course, they couldn't get back in. So, yeah, that was a big learning curve. And I got to birth a goat. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't even know that she was pregnant. So, I made a bunch of phone calls to see if someone can help me. And of course, no one was home. So that was a fascinating experience. I'm having a lot of fun, but it's a lot of hard work. You just have to put your mind to it. I feel I can feed not only my family, but my community. I'm getting to know my neighbors, and I just love it where I live. But I feel like Zetas made sure, because I was looking for a long time, Zetas made sure to push me in the right direction. They found this house for me.
Nancy, are we going to see nuclear incidents when all of this gets worse?
Boy, is that a common question, Mark, because everybody is worried of power plants, and there they go, 3 Mile Island or Chernobyl, and what about all those nuclear warheads that the U.S. and Russia had pointed at each other? What, 5,000 nukes and ay ay ay. Well, this is not admitted, by the establishment, but the Council of Worlds, through all the alien sources, it's not the Zetas. I mean, there's 1,000 different life form types running around the world that are benign aliens, not just the Zetas, negated those nukes. And I know this can be done because I saw it. It was a demonstration for the military in the U.S. And here was something radioactive in a container, and you could take the top off and run a Geiger counter over it, right? Something radioactive down there. Here come the Zetas with something in clear liquid in a vial and poured it in there. And then they ran the Geiger counter over it, and there was nothing. The radioactivity was gone. And they are able to do this because, after all, radioactivity is just an arrangement in the atoms that changes over time to become benign rather than whatever radioactivity is. So they did that to all these nukes. So the U.S. and Russia do not have, and I would suspect that's true of other countries like Israel, etc., that their nukes are negated also. Although, because we have an element of doubt rule, if somebody was determined to send a nuke somewhere, like Israel into Iran or whatever, that would likely blow up and be nuclear, because you can't have people worldwide suddenly having undeniable proof that aliens exist, etc., because the shock would create too much anxiety, fear, people would start attacking each other, yada yada. So, it's basically possible that there would be a nuclear attack, but you and I have to be reassured that they've been negated. Well, what about power plants? Well, we have been told that there will be help when the time comes. When we get to the pole shift, when we get to the last weeks, why did Fukushima happen then? Because people need to be aware they need to press. This is a spiritual journey. This is a spiritual schoolhouse. People need to rise up and say, we've got to shut down our power plants, press their politicians, and the like, and not just sit passively like babies expecting to be taken care of. Oh, the aliens will take care of us. It'll all be okay. No, 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 you got to get active. You have to take action. And that's what it's all about. So people are encouraged to get active. Take a look at what happened in Japan. Fukushima. Then they had in Tokyo an election where there were 2 politicians. One said, I believe it was for the country, take down all nuclear power plants in the country. That's not right. We shouldn't do this. And the other said, no, continue with them. Well, guess which one won? The one that promised to continue cheap electricity is going to continue. In other words, the people in Japan would rather have their cheap electricity than avoid a catastrophe like Fukushima. Well, that doesn't speak to maturity, spiritual maturity. So the answer to you, Mark, is we are not going to have nuclear holocausts. But in the short term, we may have lessons.
Is China suppressing Zeta talk?
I did have some awareness that they were blocking it. They have a gate. They have gateways, but I don't think so. I think that they've loosened up. I get a lot of email from China. Take a look at their ghost cities. What are we talking about here? For several years now, they've had cities toward the north side in highland, kind of toward the Mongolian desert, that if you take an analysis, and we have done that, is far enough from the new South Pole, which is going to be over India, that it won't be any different than the Canadian climate. It's away from the coastlines and high. And these cities, it's been seen on satellite imaging. These cities have buildings, streets, parks, totally empty. Nobody, what are they waiting for? Why did they build them? Well, it's quite clear that they took an analysis of the new climate predicted by the Zetas, and they said, this is where we'll be moving our populace. Now, does Russia take it seriously? Oh, yeah. If you take a look at the flooding in Siberia, because of the friction from a crustal shift, the oceans will heat up at the deep levels and rise to 675 feet sea level. So I have computed that early in Zeta Talk. I did, and Europe becomes a series of islands, and Siberia, except for the Ural Mountains, and then, of course, there's the Far East. Russia has delightful land to the Far East, very underpopulated, going to be very warm because the new equator is going to go right through the Bering Straits, and they need to move all the people from the area around Moscow and shift them all over there, past Kazakhstan up there in the Far East, which the 250 million, they will have the room for that populace. Be a big move. So what did we see about a year ago? The new president of Russia, and I'm sure I'm going to mispronounce this, Medvedev, sorry. Anyway, here comes this article saying that all the state offices are going to move from Moscow to the Far East of Russia. So they're taking it seriously too.
When does the pole shift happen?
We're not going to get the date. Jesus said, none shall know the date of my return. And what he was talking about when he was talking about his return is that the earth will transform as it's scheduled to, into being a home only for the good-hearted, the 95% that are community-oriented, practice the golden rule, yada yada, and the bad guys get hauled off to the prison planet. That's what he was talking about when he said, I will return. He meant people like me, will return. The reason that the date is not given is because the bad guys would immediately become opportunists. They would poison what they consider worthless, useless eaters, people that are not good workers, skilled or whatever. They would murder them. They would create slave camps, and they'll try to do that anyway.
Yeah.
But if they don't know the date, they can't really step forward and do all that because there are laws. And people will say, hey, what are you doing there with the poison? What's this with the poison in the water supply? That's criminal. So they hold back, waiting for some clue as to when the date's going to be so they can do it just ahead of time. But they're not going to get the date.
So could we be waiting another 10 years?
I don't think so, no. The 8 of 10 is a long phase. Like I said, 9 of 10 is the two months of the last weeks, and 10 of 10 is 1 hour. But it won't be this year. I don't think it'll be next year at all. And the reason is this is a spiritual journey. This is an opportunity. So many people are going to be able to take their final exam, so to speak. You know, you're going to have a chance to be a hero or not, to share what you have or not, you know, uh, so the Council of Worlds doesn't want to hurry that.
Nancy, we're getting a little close on time. Is there anything you wanted to tell the listeners again? Tell them about your website or any message they should be getting?
Well, I have mirror sites over a dozen around the world, you know, so you can always access one of them. But no matter what kind of internet cables are ripped or satellites might come down, I put out a weekly newsletter. We do News Data Talk every week. And you can find this readily from my website. There's a search engine that really works. And uh, don't ask me trivial questions. Do your research before you post me an email, or I'll get sharp with you. I don't suffer fools gladly. And please do start to prepare. There's no reason why you can't survive, and in fact, you'll enjoy life in the aftertime. You'll lose your flab. You'll get in shape. School will be out for the kids. You know, they get to learn by doing. You don't have to punch a clock. You don't have to pay taxes. You know, it's not grim. And on top of that, you'll begin to meet aliens. You'll be able to become galactic citizens. It's going to be a very exciting time. So that's my message.
Starr, are you posting on any websites now?
I post on the poleship.name. Gerard Swan started that, I think, in 2009. And there's a bunch of us worldwide who post what's going on, relating to Earth changes. So that's where I post, and I'm always on Facebook, and Twitter, and LinkedIn. And however I could get the message out is a wonderful thing.
We haven't talked about the new Madrid, Nancy. We've got a few minutes left. Can you at least describe that briefly?
Sure. This is a plate adjustment that must happen. And the reason is that the North American continent is a flat top. If you take a look at the shape of the plate, all the way from Japan straight across to Iceland, it's a straight line. And it cannot roll. Other continents like South America and Africa can roll, but not the North American continent. Consequently, as the Atlantic stretches apart and the Pacific compresses, it's pulled into a diagonal stress, and that is what the New Madrid fault line is about. And when it adjusts, the northeast portion of the United States will move to the northeast, and then the rest moves to the southwest, ripping all the bridges on the Mississippi and rumpling Ohio, because the New Madrid runs under the Great Lakes and up through Ohio. And it'll be a mess for how many of those cities that are built out of brick and masonry, etc., are going to crumble. So you can see that Obama's getting ready for this. He has executive orders to actually enable the whole federal government to, I presume, take over idle farmland and shift the populace out there and say, okay, build your barracks, and here's the seed, and here's the goats and the chickens, now feed yourself. I think that's what's coming. It's not going to be trailers and the beans and rice and tent cities. It's going to be a lot more proactive in developing survival communities in a lot of our idle farmland. So this is coming, and we are under a lot of stress. We're having, crevasses open up and bridges drop and highways rumple and the like, but a lot of humming and such, and the house shakes in the middle of the night or whatever. But we'll start to have sevens and eights, and then we may have a 9, a magnitude 9, where the big ripping happens. It's got to happen because of the shape of the plate. But we'll have a lot of precursor earthquakes.
What are these humming boxes you talk about on Zeta Talk?
when Obama and the Council of Worlds agreed that the 7 of 10 would be modulated, how does the Council of Worlds physically prevent the plates from creating the damage that they could and creating death. Oh, they have, they've been discovered and then they disappear. And it's a box and nobody can open it. It's some kind of metal. It seems to be humming. That's affecting the fault line and in such a way that a big rip doesn't happen. Just what the technology is, I don't know. But from a human standpoint, it's been discovered and even photographed. Oh, there was this box and the federal government came and took it away, and we heard that they tried to open it and couldn't. It was a strong enough metal that they couldn't. And it seems to be humming or glowing or something. And they've been discovered in Sri Lanka and in Oregon. So it's just the means by which the Council of Worlds has slowed down the violence of the 7 of 10 plate movements.
So the humming boxes are extraterrestrial.
Yes, yes.
And they were built by some extraterrestrial group?
Correct.
Probably the Zetas?
Oh, I wouldn't, they're just one of 1,000 different life forms. I don't think it was the Zetas. Somebody else. Yeah.
And you talk about the St. Lawrence split.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that briefly?
Yeah, if you take a look at the stress on the North American continent, the St. Lawrence Seaway is going to be ripping open, and there's an awful lot of humming going on, like around Detroit, and the like. Even Wisconsin is splitting open. People, Green Bay hum. We have one, and booming. Yeah, we had booming 5 miles from my house here in central Wisconsin, and we had it in Baraboo. Boom, boom, snapping rock. So it's pulling open, and at the hour of the pole shift, it'll pull open plenty. The Niagara will not be the falls it is, and I'm not sure how many of the Great Lakes will kind of empty out and the like. Even Chicago is going to be badly devastated and rip and pour into the Mississippi to some degree, waters from the Great Lakes. So this is all in Zeta Talk. You can read in the safe locations information about your location and what is projected and predicted to happen.
So some of the Great Lakes might literally open up and drain out?
Yes, yes. But I think most likely there will be new catch points. That hasn't been detailed a lot, but the fact is the St. Lawrence is going to rip open, yeah.
Is the Mississippi going to expand?
During the New Madrid, it does. It'll be
Thanks, Nancy. I guess we're out of time.